Hello everyone, this is David from Spreadlead. Today we want to talk about the gauges. What is gauges? Everybody is talking about the gauges every day in their daily work. The buyer is talking about gauges, the merchandiser is talking about gauge. But what is gauge exactly? So first, the gauge represents how many needles in 1 inches on the machines. Giving the example of 12 gauge, that means there are 12 needles in 1 inches on 12 gauge machines. So it represents the trunkness or the fineness for the knitwear. And it's a very important numbers when you work on the knitwear. So today I have 7 samples to show you different gauges to give you the first expression about different gauges. And I hope that you have a roughly feeling about them. First, let's talk about 12 gauge. That's one of the most common gauges in the flat knitwear. And I think if you have been ever working with knitwear, will work with 12 gauge. And this is one of the most commercial one, and which means that all the brands will use this gauge, and almost every factory will equip 12 gauge with the highest amount. The good thing about this gauge is it's more about the transitional pieces. You can either use it in the spring summer and also in the autumn winter. And the cost is also kind of a bit lower comparing to the other gauges. And next to it, we have the 14 gauge. It's slightly more finer than the 12. In the past, it's more widely in the ladies wear, but in our men's knitwear, it has been more widely used than 12 even sometimes. There's a certain point that we have about 50% of our capacity in the whole production, we use 14. So in the autumn winter, we use a lot of 14 for the merino wool, for the tightness, for avoid the wrinkles. And in spring summer, we use it to create kind of lightweight polos and t-shirts. So 14 is quite important for us. And next to 14, we have the 16. And this is one of the gauge I put a lot of attention in last 2 years, because I believe there's a big trend in 16 coming up, especially in the luxury knitwear, for the more luxury feeling, more finest feelings, for merino wool, also for a little bit kind of cotton silk yarns, 100% silk yarns, you need 16 to have the flatness and tightness. And especially for some very light garments, you don't need to have something see-through but still have very light feelings. I think 16 is very suitable. Then next to 12, we will have 9 gauge. And the 9 gauge actually is one of the rarest gauges in the market. And a lot of product developers will skip 9 gauge because the numbers of 9 gauge machine is kind of the smallest in the market, and a lot of factory and sampling will even not equip the 9 gauge sampling machines. For me, I think this is one of my favorite, because I think first it creates a special thickness, and second, I think it's also very suitable for some wool products, and it gives a little bit space to the wool yarns but still has the control of the weight. Then we have the 7. It's also a very good weight for the menswear. It has the trunkness, it has the masculine feelings, but still comparing to 5 or 3, the weight is under control. Then we use a lot of 7, especially in the washing items, but also in the winter, for example, 80-20 lambs wool, we use a lot of 7 gauge as well. Then we come to the 5, and 5 is kind of commercial gauge. In the 6 gauge range, it's just like 12 in the 6 gauge, and all the factory will equip 5 gauge. And in the past, it's more like wool products or like Christmas knitwear, but now it's also coming a little bit to the summer. For example, this one of the best seller in the crochet knit in spring summer to have a special feelings. So people doing things like opposite way. And then next to 5, we have the 3 gauge. As you can see, 3 is more trunky, a lot more open knits, and also the neck rib is more open. There are more space between every needles, and it's also getting more popular because a lot of people need 3 gauge to give the expression of the collection, to have a separate feelings comparing to the other gauges. All these 7 samples represents different gauges. It's more easy to tell just looking at the samples, but it's more difficult if you judge yourself on the sample yourself. And it's also a very complex question how to decide to use different gauges. For me, I think it's the most important is when you have different choice, which gauge needs to be chosen as the most suitable one for each article. And it's also very important to use the different character, to play around different gauges, between different gauges. I think it's very difficult to tell you everything in this short video, but I hope I can tell you more in my future videos. Thanks for watching this video. If you have any question about the gauges, you're very welcome to comment under my post. And we are Spreadlead. We only make men's knitwear.